Good day. If there's one icon that could sum up PC gaming in the 90s, it would be Duke Nukem. Really, in the 90s, the PC was the best platform for games. It had the best graphics, it had the best sound, it had the most advanced gameplay. Really, the PC was the machine. Sure, the consoles had some great games here and there, but it was on the PC that you could find the best games. And Duke was the best icon. Mario, Sonic, all the rest could not even combined reach a quarter the awesomeness that was Duke. Now, before we actually get into Duke 3D, I want to first take a look at a bit of Duke history. Duke 3D was actually the third game in the Duke franchise. The game we're looking at here is the first Duke Nukem, and it's pretty bad. Even for the time, it's a pretty lame side-scroller. I would say that Contra on the NES was superior, and it came out in 1988, whereas this one came out in 1991. When you look at Contra, it's fast and fluid, whereas this one is really slow and awkward. But one must remember that without this game, Duke 3D would not exist. Duke 2 is still a pretty basic side-scroller, but it is vastly superior to Duke 1, and it did lay down some of the groundwork for the Duke character. Here's a true story that is pretty sad. When I was but a callow youth, I was in a software store and found Duke Nukem 2. Now, at the time, I had played Duke 3D and had rather enjoyed it, and to my simple mind, I thought, oh, Duke Nukem 2. That must be the sequel to Duke Nukem 3D, because Duke Nukem 3D doesn't have a 3 anywhere near it. You would think that would be the first one. So thinking that Duke Nukem 2 was the sequel to Duke 3D, I took it home and was promptly disappointed when I found out that it was nothing more than a side-scroll that was actually pretty lame. Now, of course, one must remember that at the time when this took place, the internet was not all that prevalent, and I doubt that Wikipedia even existed yet, so there was no real way to check. In any event, Duke 2 is not really all that bad, but it's still just an extremely basic side-scroller that I have to say is actually still not as good as Contra. But one must remember that, like with Duke 1, without this game, Duke would not exist. Well, so now that we know a little bit about old Duke, let's jump right in and take a look at Duke Nukem 3D. As should be fairly obvious, Duke 3D is a first-person shooter. It uses the build engine, which is fairly similar to the Doom engine, but it has a few improvements here and there. Now, one could be quick to dismiss this game as just another Doom clone. The only problem is that, like with Dark Forces, the only thing it has similar to Doom is the graphical style, and that is about it. Duke massively improves upon everything Doom did, and to a certain extent, it improves upon elements introduced in Dark Forces as well. Now, like in Dark Forces, the levels in Duke are massive, and they don't have you just traveling in a straight line. The levels also have a great deal of variety as well, and they don't ever really get monotonous. Now, in most first-person shooters prior to Duke, you primarily just run and gunned in fairly nondescript corridors or other similarly unremarkable locations. In Duke, on the other hand, levels have a wide variety of set pieces, and there are a large number of open areas. So you are not just stuck in the same drab building the entire game. Another aspect of the game that was unique at the time was the jetpack. At the time, you barely got to jump, but in Duke, you get to fly around, and in some cases, you could even get into air battles. Now, what you actually did in Duke 3D was fairly standard for the time. You just collected keys and opened doors and pulled an in-level switch. But how you go about doing this is anything but basic, and it's not just a straight shot to the door. There is a great deal of backtracking and searching to find the bloody key cards. And sometimes in the game, the very act of acquiring a key is actually very epic. In the very second level, you have to completely destroy a building just to get to the yellow key card. Graphics for Duke 3D are fairly standard for the time, but everything is identifiable and all the environments have a tremendous amount of detail. When you are in a city, it looks like you're really fighting in a city. One particular part that I always found fun was the bottles and how you could shoot the lot of them. In addition to the bottles, there are a great number of destructible objects. that of course are just begging to be shot. It's always smashy time when Duke's around. The levels really get good when you get to the episode titled The Birth. The first level in that episode has you fighting through the Impossible Mission Facility. That of course is a reference to the classic TV series Mission Impossible. Not only that, but if you activate this tape player, it will explode. The level is actually impossible, as there are just hundreds of enemies waiting to blast you into a red smear on the ground. And that brings us to another aspect of Duke 3D, the difficulty. This game is extremely difficult to beat, and with good reason. You're controlling Duke Nukem, and in order to do that, you have to be hardcore. The difficulties are fairly clever and somewhat humorous. And while the lowest difficulty is called Piece of Cake, it does not mean that it's easy. Really, on this difficulty, it would be labeled hard in other games. Now, one cool thing about the difficulties is the fact that after you select one, Duke says its name. Damn, I'm good. The game was also remarkable for the fact that there was blood spatter. Sometimes when you shot an enemy, blood would actually fly onto the wall, thus providing a more visceral experience. Also, sometimes there would be a pool of blood on the floor and you could walk through it and have bloody footprints everywhere. What? Running through pools of blood can be entertaining? Hey, don't look at me like that. At least it's not like in Dead Space 2 where you have to shoot mutated infants. Although that was rather entertaining in and of itself. Moving on! One final thing I want to mention about the levels is the fact that some parts of it are destructible. See this wall? It's in the way, so smashy time, boom, and now it's not. Also, in level 1, there is an earthquake that destroys part of the level. And when you get to the end of the level, Duke doesn't just pull a switch. He bloody well smashes an auto-destruct panel. Now why random buildings would have an auto-destruct button, I couldn't really say. But wait a minute. It's Duke. That should be enough explanation. When you start the game, you of course have the basic pistol, and it's somewhat remarkable for the fact that it is capable of full auto and there is a reloading animation. Really though, this thing is almost useless. The shotgun is, in my opinion at least, the best weapon of the game. With it, you can kill most of the basic enemies in one shot, and it has fairly plentiful ammunition. The chain gun is good for large crowds of enemies since the shotgun has a fairly low rate of fire. The problem is though, you're going to blow through ammo really fast. The RPG is a weapon that's fairly useful for taking down large enemies such as bosses, but it is also very good for taking out large crowds of enemies. The pipe bomb is useful because it's a good remote explosive. You can blow up in walls and you can lay traps, and it's a good way to kill things without exposing yourself to enemy fire. You then have the shrink ray. It lets you step on various enemies, and while that's very entertaining and somewhat satisfying, I honestly never really use this weapon, and it does leave you exposed to fire as you step on your shrunken foes. There's also a microwave gun as well, but all it does is do the exact opposite of the shrink ray, and your enemies explode, but it's just really not all that useful. Then there is the Devastator. It's basically a machine gun rocket launcher, and it's good for the large enemies and large groups of enemies. Personally, I never used the trip mine, but I get why it would be a good weapon to use on the higher difficulties. It would allow you to kill enemies without ever exposing yourself to fire. The freeze ray is just that. It's cool.
Cool party.
Sorry, you know I had to. Anyway, the weapon is not really all that useful, as you have to shoot enemies quite a few times, and they don't just shatter on their own. You have to actually shatter them, otherwise they'll thaw out for some reason and promptly start attacking you again. The only problem with shattering them is you have to get up close to them and you have to kick them, and sometimes the kick is a bit finicky. And really, the weapon is just pretty much worthless, I have to say. There are always large numbers of enemies, especially on higher difficulties. So this game is not so much about running and gunning as it is about hiding behind a wall and hoping fervently that you don't get your face shot off. Really, you can't just yell all glory to the first man to die and then charge. You actually have to use tactics and strategy to survive. Now, let's take a look at old Duke himself. Duke is not a character. He has no development, and he doesn't have any dialogue whatsoever outside of his awesome sayings. So in all reality, Duke is just a symbol. But then again, he's a very good symbol, I have to say, as everything that comes out of his mouth is just pure awesomeness. One could say he is the personification of awesome. There are so many great things that Duke does that no other FPS hero ever did. If you're low on health, let Duke stop by the bathroom and let him regenerate 10 points. Walk up to the mirror, and what does Duke say?
Damn, I'm looking good.
Now after Duke achieved such tremendous success, it was ported to just about every console imaginable. Some of the ports were good, some were decent, and some were just terrible. The one I want to take a close look at today is Duke 64. Now, as one would expect, Duke 64 is probably the best port of Duke on any console. It had fairly good controls and had a decent frame rate. Also, the weapon sprites were redone and actually look better than their PC predecessors. Most of the enemies are left intact, and some even received a new sprite altogether. Now, since this was on a console, some of the things had to be toned down a bit, but overall, the Duke experience was still there. One thing that I liked about Duke 64 is the fact that you could save the various babes that are scattered around. And that's my main gripe with Duke. You have babes in the game, but you can't actually rescue them. I mean, really, if you're gonna have babes in any game, you'd bloody well better be able to save them from their fate. In Duke 64, you can save them by having them get teleported to some unknown location, so that they can be returned to good health. Now, I get why the developers of Duke 3D might have made it so that you had to shoot them. It might have been so that you, the player, would be reminded that while you are indeed having fun, the war that you're fighting had a tremendous human cost. The problem with this is the fact that it dampens the overall humorous spirit of the game. Duke 3D is still to this day one of my favorite first-person shooters. And like with Doom and Dark Forces, there is a way to play it on a modern machine, and that's through using eDuke 32. Now, as to Duke Forever, I don't know. I think it will be a worthy sequel, and I can't wait for it to come out in May. Sorry, gotta take this. Yes? Aliens invaded Gearbox Studios? The only copy of Duke Nukem Forever stolen? This shall not stand! It's time to kick ass and chew bubblegum. And I'm all out of gum.
Let's rock.
Now I'm pretty sure you're wondering, why am I alluding to a game that's already been out for 4 years? Well, you see, when I reviewed this game way back in 2010, I had yet to experience the splendor and wonder that was Duke Nukem Forever, and once I did experience said splendor and wonder, I've been working for the past 4 years tirelessly to make a review that will do this interesting game justice. And now I finally want to tell you all when it's going to be made.